Welcome to the GECA Podcast, powered by the Global Equity Crowdfunding Alliance. Dive into the realm of borderless equity crowdfunding, where we bring the world's top experts and industry leaders directly to you, discussing innovations that are redrawing the boundaries of finance. Ready to expand your horizons? Here's your host, Andy Field.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GECA Podcast, the voice of global equity crowdfunding. I'm Andy Field, Steering Committee Lead of the Global Equity Crowdfunding Alliance, or GECA, where we speak with the leading voices who are shaping the future of capital raising across borders. Now, as crowdfunding continues to evolve, we're exploring what it takes to run successful campaigns globally and what founders, platforms, and investors need to know to thrive in this expanding ecosystem. And today, I'm delighted to be joined by Nora Szeles, CEO of crowdfunding platform TokePortal. Nora is one of the most active voices in the European crowdfunding ecosystem. She's been deeply involved in the evolution of the industry, from building a platform under the ECSPR framework to launching initiatives that support the next generation of startups and investors. So welcome, Nora. It's great to have you here.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the invitation, Andy.
No problem at all. And it's always great to talk with you. And perhaps we could start with a little bit about your journey into crowdfunding and what drew you into the industry in the first place.
Okay. Ever since I know my mind, I've been on regulated capital markets. I started my career when I was about 20 at the Budapest Stock Exchange, actually, when it was reopened after the communist regime. And I was yet a student, and then I got stuck there immediately. So then I worked for the stock exchange and launched a few days later derivatives trading. So after the stocks were listed, we started to look at derivatives, and I knew all around the world that derivatives are being traded. And I had a mentor, a great professional and professor of derivatives trading and pricing at the Budapest University or Corvinus University, who then became board member of the stock exchange and sort of asked my assistants to launch the futures and derivatives trading, and that was a success against all odds. So I do remember that brokers told me on the floor, it was yet open outcry, that no one will trade. Who will trade here futures and options when there are even a few securities? And I told them that you are going to do this job. And then that's what happened, actually. But as a rule of thumb, so everything in capital markets, the more you are like your peers, the better you are. So it's not in terms of regulation, in terms of market efficiency, in terms of approach. It's not regulation that should divide, or we should be competitive. It's with the product and the pipeline and the local story is what should matter in the end of the day. Not we shouldn't deviate from, in terms of regulation, from more developed markets. That's what I learned at that time when there was not no internet, nothing. So I had to travel to wherever, to other marketplaces to see how they work. So this is how I was so socialized in capital markets. Then we have to be very good at regulation, and then the product development shall be remain and become competitive locally. And then the other observation that was very much important to me is came with the first crisis. After when I left the stock exchange, I became a broker, of course, a derivatives broker. And I was there at the Russian crisis on the floor, actually 8 months pregnant. And then at that time, we yet thought that that's what crisis is called, that half a year long Russian crisis, when the Hungarian index called books lost 2/3 of its value within a few months. This is what we then thought it was crisis. And I saw very many people getting ruined, etc. And that completely changed my mindset when I observed that the fall on other markets, like on the Polish, which is supposed to be very much related to the Hungarian, especially from a Western institutional investors' point of view, that the Polish market fell much less, and then also other markets here in the area fell less than the books. And what we came up with as a reason for that was that the participation of the retail investor on the market as owners of the shares mattered a lot because the retail investor is a lot. First of all, it doesn't release stop loss orders when everything has to be sold, no matter what the price was. They sit and wait and pay. Of course, some of them liquidate positions, but it's not a coordinated huge sell order to the market, which just further deepens the crisis.
Yeah.
And that was an extremely important recognition for me because I heard as a broker from other brokerage companies here in Hungary that it's the London institutional investor which is the god, because of course with one single order we earned revenue for a year, and to go into retail is extremely cumbersome, it's very costly, and it's very risky because then if small tickets don't pay off, and etc. etc. So all brokers at that time focused on institutional investors, and the institutional investors, when it takes action in a crisis, it's always a stop loss order, and that ruins everything then in the end, so to say. And so that was first observation. Second was that that was very local, very typical for the Budapest Stock Exchange, that although I do absolutely respect the work that they did in the pioneering work of launching the first communist regime stock market, relaunching actually, because it was a huge, fantastically developed stock market before. Then you might have heard of that. I said there's a recent development I would really love to share later in this podcast about a research about the old stock market in the Budapest Commodity and Stock Exchange from the second, from earlier than the second one. So what the second observation was that we all thought, I mean, we as a 20-year-old green-eared newcomer, of course, less than very well respected experts in the leading positions, but they all thought that the issuer will just, ring on the door and would ask for being admitted to the stock trading, to the floor, and it just happens that companies are born like big and very profitable, and they all there stand and queue up begging the stock market operator to the trading floor, and it's actually the opposite is true. And I always thought that, why you guys think that big companies will just all the time be in the pipeline when you don't help young companies become big and there's no service available for them, and so that the demand, I mean, was there from young companies and they were rejected. The demand was not nurtured on the side of the investor side. So many young retail investors, there was no appetite for retail investors on the side of the brokerage companies. So that was also totally underserved. And I thought that actually then there's no then there's no future for the stock markets, and actually it has become true, but I wish it wouldn't have become true. And so I did really give up on the capital market development on the incumbent side, although I also received, because we started to criticize the stock market sort of strategists, that how we did emphasize it with a few colleagues of mine, and then suddenly the Federation of European Stock Exchanges nominated me and my colleague Morosi Gábor to the Young Researcher of the Year award. And no, it's not, that was in a long time ago, but even since then, no Hungarians won that prize. And that's the stock market here just said that they didn't even whatever. Okay, never mind. So we did win this prize because we were right in forecasting that it's not going to go on. With the third assumption as well, that there was no cross-border collaboration. It was instead a very primitive jealousy that if whether the Polish or the Prague or the Belgrade stock exchanges should lead a coalition. This is where it all got stuck because and etc. So all these three columns, like demand side, supply side, and the cross-border side got stuck at that time. So I decided to leave because I will not be able to change this until the Jobs Act was enacted in the US. Of course, the name of that is Crises. And then I thought, wow, I did read about that. And I mean, not me, but I was invited to the university when the father, one of the fathers, because of course, he, successful laws always have several fathers, but one of the fathers who was supposed to be very much there when the Jobs Act was passed, came to deliver a lecture at the Budapest Stock Exchange, and then I did read also the regulation, and I thought it's a good regulation, and I understood what it means, that they lifted the bar of the issuance of early phase companies, which was actually, when you just think about that even retail investors in listed companies, it's not a very old story, because it was not before the 40s when which one of the bigger, Merrill Lynch, I think, sort of roadshowed across the US for retail investors in listed stocks, because even before that not even wasn't popular, but wasn't even regulated. So that I thought it's a really historic milestone. I realized that it allows private companies for small IPOs, actually, that is our IPOs for private companies, which was never earlier the case. And then I heard that there's the European initiative already going on, and this is why I started to follow that. And when the draft of the ECSPR on the 7th of March 2018 appeared on the Parliament's website, on the EP's website, and then I read the draft, and I thought it's going to be a good regulation. And then I raised a little money to to prepare the launch of TokePortal, far too little money but I was too optimistic to launch the business. So that's actually the story in a nutshell. I hope it made sense.
It did make sense, and it was a great timeline as well, and I can understand the timeline. So you started TokePortal in Hungary and later moved to Malta more recently.
Yes.
What drove that evolution, and what were the strategic reasons behind that move?
Yeah. Of course. I mean, as I also detailed earlier, I was always regulated by the National Bank of Hungary because of the stock exchange, and later I also became a broker, and then I also worked as an asset manager, which I didn't mention. So I never had a problem with the National Bank of Hungary. Really, it was at that time a relatively well established, a knowledgeable institution. But for crowdfunding, before crowdfunding, there was a huge scandal here in a brokerage scandal, that they cheated on retail investors and who actually demonstrated on the street, etc., because they lost all the money. And they and the National Bank of Hungary became very cautious. It sounds positive, but it was rather, they became very negative around anything that was involved retail investors. So it was like they didn't reject crowdfunding, I wouldn't say so, and I think nowadays they are much more open to that again. But we simply didn't really get answers for an entire year, although we were with a normal relationship. And to be honest, although it's not a private talk, but the reputation of Hungary has deteriorated in those times, and we thought, because we always wanted to go international with crowdfunding, that it's time to look around where to relocate, and maybe we will decide to do so. And then we went to interview a few regulators, and I really like the approach of the Malta MFSA, and we got, of course, several Hungarian companies already established there. also from other countries as well. Malta wants to position itself as a financial hub. It does have the resources. I like the size of it. It's, it remembers me, it's even smaller than Hungary, so I feel sort of comfortable.
Yeah.
And of course, it's not perfect at all, but it's relatively supportive, and that's very important. So I don't mind if it's a Hungarian or a Maltese license, or a Let or a British if it was in the UK, or or a Swedish. And up to a certain point we had to decide, and because of the regulation enacted a very strict deadline. And that we were already behind that. So then we decided, it was a bit of speculative, but now I think
It's worked out nicely.
getting established there. However, actually, I got to say that it is by far much more than simple obtaining a license. The regulator expects you, and we also wanted to take the advantage to develop the business in Malta. But then you have to then learn and employ not only the regulatory side, but in another country, the corporate law, the local ecosystem in terms of also, for example, company service providers, etc. So it's not at all only a license. It is a completely new setup, and so we are now doing this job on riding on two horses, as the Hungarians say,
absolutely.
which is exhausting, really, although exhausting at a higher level than it's thought. But fortunately, it looks like now we are raising funds to build capacities, and from now on, actually, we are now in at least the way I see ourselves is we are there where we should have been 2 years ago, but we are finally there. So from now on, and especially, and not also with the help of such initiatives like GECA, Eurocrowd, ETFA, and all these very important international initiatives, associations, etc., with whom it's so much fun to detect that how much we share the same mission, that we don't only learn from each other, but we sort of share originally the same mission, and that's why it's very it's also fun, and it's a huge learning curve that against all currently existing boundaries, etc., that we might also address it here in this podcast, but your podcast series always address such problems. And also ETFA and other companies, and we will talk about that at the upcoming conference in Malaga that you can link in the podcast description. We all want to join forces to conquer these obstacles, not only legal ones, which still exist despite of the cross-border nature of ECSPR, but mental, costly, tax, and a lot of other relevancies.
And you're right. In order to see the benefits of the unified European framework, we know that exists in theory, but we're still some way to unlocking the potential for that. And some of those complexities we are coming together to solve. And that's why, the benefit of, like you say, meeting the people who share common goals, and together we'll create that noise and try and make that happen. Just to move on to the Europe. So we've moved nicely actually onto the European crowdfunding ecosystem. I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. So you're really active across the European startup and crowdfunding ecosystem, because you mentioned there some of the organizations you're involved with. But from your vantage point, what sort of it really encourages you and excites you most about where the industry is heading in that respect?
As said, I mean, this is my absolute mission to conquer borders, to nurture and serve the demand from bottom up. So that's what I do believe, that due to the digitalization in every aspect, from the simple internet to blockchain and Web3 technologies, now we have all the tools in our hands that can democratize, and it's not an empty word, but a very important mission, to democratize access to funding and also to investments, to enhance financial literacy, honestly, I'm in fight all the time with the banking system. I don't like when intermediaries make more money than the ultimate savers, and that's what I observe. And I would like to disintermediate as much as possible until up to the point when it's not at the expense of risks and knowledge, but at the expense of but to decrease the and to leave more to at the saver, more knowledge, more money, more profit. And that's the tool. One of the tools to do so is crowdfunding, which enables that an ecosystem grows from bottom up, because the barriers of entry on both sides of that marketplace, of the crowdfunding marketplace, are much lower than ever before. So if you can start investing from as little as 100 to join a story of a prospect failure in most cases, but sometimes a growth story. And if you are founder of a company that exists now with 3 people, but have something already on the market, have traction and a mission and the drive to create something, to offer a service directly, and to raise funds then directly, to convert the network, to monetize all the traction and the entire network and users, etc. That's what I think is the completion of that sort of mission that drives me since I detected the problems with incumbent capital markets when I was in
so making this available to everybody, democratizing this type of finance is a passion, obviously. I mean, one of the things that we talk about in GECA is the idea of borderless crowdfunding, obviously. So from your experience, how close do you think we are to actually making that a reality? I mean, obviously it's possible, but to making it a little bit more mainstream.
Yeah, look, everything is connected with everything, and I don't want to complicate my answer, but of course, this legal framework enables us to offer services cross-border. It means that we don't have to obtain further and further licenses to market our offerings or enable a startup or an SME to launch a campaign from another EU country on our website. That just goes through at one single point of entry. This is our own regulated conditions. So that's the basics. So this is not enough to succeed at all. It's very important that the financial literacy, financial ecosystem, in that term, that interconnectedness, alumni-based culture, when successful funders and successful crowdfunders also then start to reinvest in companies that come after them, that they share the knowledge, that they become real role models. It is coming, and the pattern is, I think, is strengthening, but not enough. So it's associations like yours have this mission to build bridges and to communicate, to elevate, and to elaborate such and make it visible, make it raising awareness.
Yes, raising awareness. Yeah, absolutely.
So what I would like to say, so tomorrow I could launch a campaign for a Turkish company and try to propose it to Maltese investors, for example. Then the campaign can be successful because it's generally relatively low tickets in terms of let's say, hypothetically, it could be as big as 5 million. But in capital market terms, it's still little. But the average round is still below 1 million euros. If you do your job well, then you can do this because you know your community. You can forward. You can also do some manual pairing of investor with the funders. So one by one, we can absolutely create success stories cross-border type of investments. If, for example, this Turkish company wants to sell its services, to Malta, then it's very obvious that they can give it a try to raise funds for that purpose, because then a Maltese investor would eventually believe that it will have a hands-on benefit from the investment, not only financial, but then it wants to enable this Turkish company to offer that service in Malta. The problem, I think, is rather comes afterwards when you want to for example, if it's an equity campaign, which is GECA is for equity, and I myself is for equity too. So how to issue the shares, at what cost, how to allocate them at what cost, and if they want to trade these shares. And that's, of course, another mission to make it not only hypothetically transferable, but that the secondary market should be enabled as a real option to exit earlier, independently from the founder, which is the original exit strategy of startups in general. Then there are huge problems already, because then costs are extreme, services are hard to access, if at all available, and then some investors get fed up with that they should wait a long time for their shares, although they know that because it's a startup and it's not the stock market, they wouldn't yet trade them. But still, it's annoying that it's usually it's cannot be that easily handled. And then let's say this Maltese investor wants to sell, invested two shares, let's say 20, no matter what the volume is now, into this Turkish company, and now it wants to sell it to a Swedish investor. Yeah, sure. Then it's a nightmare. So then, but digitalization, tokenization, Web3 based technologies can all help this, but the penetration of such services is yet not good enough. So we have to do, and it's also for me yet very unknown, because I'm not a tech-brained individual. So, but it is coming. We will need it. So, but need to build capacities to learn and then to employ it smartly and of course compliantly. So that's what has to be implemented, and I think that's one of the biggest problems. And then taxation, which will never be harmonized, is also another problem, that bigger checks are not written in crowdfunding due to taxation differences and obstacles. That's also another issue to address.
All of these things that we're talking about, all of these things we're talking about, and we're making a start on addressing these, which is great. And I just want to move on quickly, and I completely agree with all of those points you made there. They're all certainly on the agenda of discussion points and working groups for GECA. And so you're now helping to build the next generation. You've so alongside your work with TokePortal, you've launched something quite unique in Europe, which is an incubator called First Crowd. Can you just tell us a little bit about that, just a couple of minutes on how that sort of connects with crowdfunding as a pathway for startups?
Yes, we would like to offer it as a very important column of our, so to say, in our strategy, as the entry point to crowdfunding for the very early phase companies, or for those companies who just want to add additional services to their portfolio and getting then crowdfunded. So the First Crowd incubator's main purposes, but it will be a very inclusive incubator. It has just been incorporated in Malta, so we are not yet talking about results. We will just launch a program. Okay, thank you very much for your question. But the mission is to put enough focus on the pipeline building, not only to TokePortal, but also they can opt for crowdfunding at other platforms, and we will be helpful for them. We hope that, let's say, okay, let's remain about the Turkish example, but it doesn't have any reason. Just that it is how this is what I said, that if they want to go back to Turkey to choose a Turkish platform to crowdfund, of course, no problem with that. But we try to get them crowdfundable, I mean, investable. That means they will get an audit in the beginning very quickly and efficiently. And we try to internalize that knowledge that would help them get incubated, meaning the crowdfunding ready. And of course, that also means that they could get any other type of investment, because and on top of that also crowdfunding. That's what we as therefore as the last word I would really like to emphasize on that, how inclusive crowdfunding is. And that's also something we have to advocate, because very many funders think that they should choose between or crowdfunding, or if they finally whatever got another investment, then they don't have to fuss with crowdfunding and they miss their momentum instead of leveraging what they just received. So that's also a question of education. So we would like to be a crowdfunding hub for all terms. We will onboard prospect crowdfunders, and we will pair them and match them with the internal knowledge, not only delegated by TokePortal, but we would be very open and inclusive, so the entire industry is welcome to participate for if they see a value in it. And we would like to come up with the program over the course of the next months. The incubator will not led by myself. I'm focusing on the regulated entity, TokePortal.com, and as a partner, we are the funder of the incubator, but we would like to also go decrease our share. We would welcome other partners to co-found it yet in the relatively early phase, not only to raise capital for the incubator, but also to enable the incubator later to crowdfund itself when it has created some good traction, and that's what we would like to achieve relatively quickly. Then it should then go crowdfund itself as well, and that, of course, as you know, we have to decrease then the below 20% our own share within the incubator, but it's also a good occasion to really offer it sort of at a really very, very beneficial sort of pricing to the community to participate at. And then as an incubator, we definitely want to have a 5-star program. So anybody that survives and becomes an alumni should be a really investable venture.
I mean, the whole concept of it just is a very proactive way of developing the whole crowdfunding ecosystem. So I think it's great that you're looking at that side of things as well. We've got about 5 minutes left to talk, and I know you just wanted to mention a couple of other things. I mean, it may be that we get you back, Nora, to do another podcast as well, because you've got so much to say. But I just wanted to very briefly touch on the fact that you're involved in you're a connector of people as well. You've been involved in organising big major ecosystem events like the EU Startup Awards, EU Startup Summit. Just a quick summary really of what motivated you to take on that role.
Okay, I think it must be a misunderstanding. I didn't really co-organize it. I sort of became to a little extent partners, but we did have a very successful side event there. This is what we maybe
right. Okay, yeah.
we did, and we of course we are partners with the EU Startup Summit and try to contribute as much as possible to their success. And they are in Malta, so therefore the next upcoming event is in Malta, and we took at 20. Yeah, I can tell you that this is our discount rate, so you can just go on the website and obtain a cheaper ticket, and make sure to visit our booth. We will be there, and that's a great occasion, another occasion besides of Malaga to catch up. But definitely in Malta, we are the first to launch crowdfunding. We didn't know that until we received our license, that there was no one else, and there was, I think, one more license already given, but not who focus on something different. So as of current, we are the only one, and therefore we also had to take on the role to create the market, to launch the market, to assist. So we did really all effort to do so. It's yet still very small. So, but having closed the first so-called Maltese campaign, it means that the company was incorporated in Malta, and then we saw that it is time to do so. It was a very late adopter community, very much real estate focused and fixed income. So, but I think, and I hope we did already contribute to that they're getting more and more open to this asset class.
Excellent. Well, we'll put some links to that event that you mentioned as well
Yes.
into the description of the podcast. There are other things that I wanted to talk to you about, but we're probably not going to have time. I know you're looking at running your own crowdfunding campaign in the very near future.
Yeah.
So let's touch on
Sure.
that separately, and we'll talk a little bit about that
Okay, thanks a lot.
in a bit more detail. I mean, just one thing I'd ask: so looking ahead 5 years, what does success look like for crowdfunding in Europe?
Yeah. Oh, okay. That
And
will
you've got
take another half an hour.
you've got
But
1 minute to take it.
yeah. Okay. Look, as crowdfunding service providers are almost all startups, independent startups, and most of them are in cash flow negative phase, which makes them extremely hard to build a market and to grow at a time without any centralized grant or scheme or governmental maximum communication. But that's also we would complain rather about that, not concretely, but generally that there's not enough. The expectations are high on the legislative from the legislator, like the European Union, but the support is much less. This is one fight I'm trying to to do. So in 5 years' time, I wish we'd have over 100 platforms yet. Now it's more than 200 in Europe, and all cash flow positive and happily building a market. Creating an ecosystem with a much higher level of financial literacy as a result of successful campaigns that will have been completed until now.
Perfect.
Until then.
No, perfect. That's great. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us today, Nora. Look, it's been a fantastic conversation. I think what comes through from
you
that
are fantastic,
is just,
Andy. Thank you very much.
There's so much potential in equity crowdfunding. I think that's come through. And when we start thinking beyond national borders and towards a more connected global ecosystem, like you said, at GECA, that's exactly what we're trying to encourage, bringing together the platforms, operators, researchers, policymakers to share knowledge and help move the ecosystem forward. So thanks again to Nora and to our listeners. Thanks for tuning in to our listeners. As we continue to explore the people, policies, and platforms that are unlocking crowdfunding without borders. Don't forget to follow GECA for more conversations with the people shaping the future of global equity crowdfunding, and visit thegeca.org to learn more about our mission, our growing supporter base, and how you can get involved.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Nora.